Okay, so we have one more section to cover in this chapter, which is a section on web analytics. Web analytics is also referred to as web intelligence. Basically, it boils down to the usage of advanced analytical techniques applied to web data. It is also often referred to as web mining. And there exist three different types of web analytics, web mining. The first one is web usage mining. This is also sometimes referred to as clickstream analysis. And it basically refers to how users, how visitors are going to use your website. With that we mean what pages they are going to typically visit as part of their web visit. What are the pages that are frequently visited together? This is very useful information because this is going to allow you to understand how users are going to use your website, web usage mining. A technique which is often used for that is association rules. Association rules have already been studied in the section on business intelligence and data mining. And there it was seen that association rules could be used to detect what items are frequently purchased together. Where here we're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're going to look at what pages are being frequently visited together. Web content mining is then what Google does. Google is going to analyze the content of your website to see what it is all about. Right? So here we're going to study information and discover knowledge from web page contents. This is very important for doing information retrieval and extraction. Also for automatic document categorization, to see what documents are all about, etc. Web structure mining is then going to study and analyze the structure between websites. And this will be done by looking at what website links to what other website, or what web page links to what other web page. By doing so, you can find communities of interest, communities of websites or web pages which relate to a similar topic, which discuss similar concepts. So these are the three most commonly applied web intelligence techniques or activities: web usage mining, web content mining, and web structure mining. What are the goals of web analytics and mining? Well, the first important goal is to improve your website design. For example, if your web analytics exercise tells you that two pages are often visited together, but there's no link in between, well, if you have that information, you can use that to improve your website design by making sure that there's a link from one web page to another web page. It will also allow us to see how users or segments of users are going to use our website. What web pages do they visit? Such that we can actually customize the website to individual user needs. Using web analytics and mining, we can also analyze the efficiency of our search engine marketing strategies. So remember, there are two types of search engine marketing. The first one is search engine optimization. And in search engine optimization, you're going to make sure that your website ranks high in the Google search results for particular keywords. You're going to do that without paying Google for it. In pay-per-click, you're going to pay Google in order to include a link to your website. One example of pay-per-click is Google AdWords. So by using web analytics, I can monitor the effect of a new search engine marketing strategy on traffic. I can look at conversion rates. Conversion rates is something that we're going to come back to later on in this chapter. I can also measure the effectiveness of banner campaigns and so on. Another thing I can do is I can optimize my landing or destination page. The landing or destination page is the first page that is seen during a web page visit. And what you can do using web analytics is you can actually try out different variations of a landing or destination page, each tailored to the needs of segments of particular users, and see what landing page or destination page variation is most attractive for particular groups of customers. Personalization is another usage. That means that we're going to personalize the web pages to the individual user needs. If somebody logs on to Amazon, you will see that the website or the web page that you see is customized to your individual needs based upon the previous books you purchased at Amazon, based upon the previous movies you rented, etc. So Amazon stores all that information about your previous purchases such that it can understand what you're interested in, such that it can understand your user profile, and such that it can customize the web page or website to the individual user or visitor. Now, if you want to do web analytics or web data mining, a first thing you need is data. And the data can originate from a variety of different sources. And a first very important source are server logs. Server logs are huge Word documents which are stored on a web server. Huge Word documents. And in that Word document, information about web visits will be stored. So the data is captured at the server side. And every request for a page is going to generate an entry in a web server log file. This web server log file is then a very important piece of information and can then be parsed and processed on a fixed schedule basis to provide useful information. So, if I would log on to the Amazon website from this particular computer, then information about my visit will be stored in the web server log file maintained by the Amazon web server. What information? Well, all kinds of information. First of all, the IP address of my machine. So a first piece of information is the IP address of this particular machine. Now, the IP address can always be mapped to a geographical location. So Amazon will see that somebody from Leuven is actually logging on to their website. This is very useful information because that way Amazon could see from what geographical regions it attracts visitors. The next entry in the server log is then the remote log name and username. Those will typically be blank, right? And then the time of the request, right? The time, so the date and time, which is very useful for Amazon to know because that way they can see when are users typically visiting our website. When do we have most of the users visiting our website? If we have launched a marketing campaign, for example, we can find out whether the day after we have lots of users visiting our website, yes or no. That could already be an indication of the success of the marketing campaign. What's then also very important is the page that is being requested. In my particular example, this is Dutch/shop/detail.html. So here we can see what page is being requested, which is again very useful information because that will allow us to see what are the most popular and the least popular pages. Then I also have the protocol, HTTP and the version thereof, and then I have a status code, which is 200 in my example. The status code is going to indicate whether the request for the page was successful, yes or no. 200 means successful. If I would have requested a page from the Amazon server, which was not there, because I made a typo or it's an outdated link, for example, then you would see 404, 404. 404 is the error code you get when you're accessing a page that no longer exists. That is then followed by the number of bytes transferred, which is also very important because that gives you an idea about the performance of your website and the number of bytes that is typically being downloaded. And this is then followed by a very important piece of information, which is the refer. The refer is the website that the user was on prior to the visit. So it tells you something about your incoming traffic. Where do users come from? What other website do they typically come from? Very important to know is that if the referrer is Google, then Google will also send along the query string, the search terms that were entered in Google. That's very useful information because that will tell you what search terms, what keywords are going to lead up to your website. That's very important to know if you want to invest in search engine optimization or pay-per-click campaigns, for example. If you see in this particular case, if you see that you have lots of incoming traffic from Google with the search terms buy and wine, then you know that you don't have to pay money for those search terms because you already have that traffic. So buy and wine should not be included in a pay-per-click campaign because you already have incoming traffic for those keywords. So if you want to invest in a pay-per-click campaign, you would better choose other keywords than buy and wine. Then you have the platform, which is Mozilla, this is Internet Explorer, and the version thereof, which is what we call the user agent. So you see, there's lots of interesting information stored in this web server log about the visit of the particular user. Another piece, or another way of collecting information are cookies. A cookie is a small text file, a small text string. So typically, when you will access Amazon, Amazon will put a cookie on your machine, a text file, which will typically contain a unique user ID. Let's say 123456. So every time I make a request to the Amazon website for a particular page, the cookie will be sent along. And Amazon will see that user 123456 is again accessing its website, asking for a particular piece of information. That way, Amazon will be able to actually look at visits and to look at what pages are being requested from the same visitor by using that cookie information, by using that user ID stored in a cookie. So a cookie is a small text file that a web server can send to a visitor's web browser as part of its HTTP response. The browser will then store it on the hard disk in the form of a small text file, and every time a request is being made from my laptop to the server for a particular web page, the cookie is being sent along, whereby I'm actually identifying myself as a user. So this cookie can contain all kinds of information. It can contain a unique user ID along with other customized data. It can also contain the domain and path, specifying from where it can be read. Cookies can also expire, so it can also contain an expiration date. Now those cookies are subject to a lot of regulation these days, especially in a privacy setting. By using cookies, a lot of information is gathered about your visit, so users should be informed about that. There's regulation being introduced at European level to actually say what information can and cannot be stored, and also the regulation stipulates that users should be informed about the data collection that is taking place via cookies. That's why if you log on to many websites these days, you will need to approve it yourself whether the website can store information about your visits using cookies, yes or no. This is part of informing the user. Page tagging is a third way of collecting information about your visit, and this is client-side data collection. It's not server-side, but it's client-side. That's really very important. And the way it works is as follows. The user is going to request a page from the web server, let's say from Amazon. Let's take the example of Amazon again. Then Amazon is going to send the HTML code of the page, and in that HTML code, there is a JavaScript page tag. There's a reference to a JavaScript program, which is typically stored on a data collection server. Let's say Google Analytics. Google Analytics is a well-known example of page tagging. So the JavaScript program is stored on Google Analytics. It will be downloaded to your laptop where it will be executed. So the JavaScript program is executed on your laptop. Typically that JavaScript program is going to store a cookie to identify you. Remember, cookies contain user IDs. And then all kinds of information about your visit is being gathered and sent along to the data collection server, Google Analytics. So again, I download a page from Amazon. That page has a reference to a JavaScript file, to a JavaScript program. The JavaScript program is on the Google Analytics server, which is being downloaded to the client's PC. That JavaScript program puts a cookie on the machine, and then it stores all kinds of information about the visit and sends it on to the data collection server where the user can then, or where the web server administrator can then actually have access to and see all kinds of reports about web server usage and web page usage. So page tagging is a client-side data collection. Using this information collected either through web server logs, page tags, or cookies, we can now look at page views. And a page view is the number of times that a page has been seen, was viewed. Very important there is that we have to define the concept of a page. What is a page, right? That's not always that easy to determine. If you look at Amazon, if you look at the identifier, the URI, Uniform Resource Identifier, well, you can see that it gets very detailed because Amazon basically maintains a page for every individual book in every individual game that it's selling. So maybe you're not interested in at this lowest level of detail, but you're more interested at aggregated levels. You don't want to look at individual pages or games, but you want to look at certain directories which are frequently being accessed on Amazon, for example. For example, book directories, game directories, etc. Also, page views are interesting, but maybe not that very useful because it doesn't tell you anything about the user experience. Maybe the page views are up because the user was very frustrated navigating through your website, not being able to find the information he or she was looking for. So page views can be up, but it's not necessarily a sign that the user is enjoying the website experience. Okay, so it's a lot more interesting to look at visits or sessions. Visits and sessions are synonyms of one another, and it basically is looking at the pages which are part of the same visit. Here you have a visit, index.html, then products.html, then reviews.html, and then exit. So these are pages which are part of the same website visit, made by the same visitor. So a visit is not the same as a visitor, right? A visitor can do multiple visits. A visit is typically done by one visitor. You have to imagine that information about visits is typically stored using web server logs or page tagging in combination with cookies, so it's not that straightforward to find what page was visited by what visitor. So we need procedure for sessionization. Sessionization means that you're going to come up with the sessions or the visits. And this is typically done based upon a set of heuristics, based upon a set of rules of thumb, based upon IP address, for example. IP address and user agent. If in the web server log you find two page requests made by the same IP address and the same user agent, then this is already an indication that probably this is part of the same visit. Also, we can look at cookies and user identifiers which are being stored in cookies. If you see in the web server log that you have two page requests made by the same user ID, then this is a very likely indication that this is part of the same visit. Those user IDs are often also sent along as URI parameters, parameters in the web page request, parameters of the Uniform Resource Indicator. Now, different software vendors selling web analytics software are going to do that differently. They're going to have different ways of combining IP address and user agent, of looking at cookies, or of looking at URI parameters. That's why it's not that straightforward, not that easy to reconcile metrics between different software vendors. Now, once we have that information, we can look at visitors. I can look at new visitors. These are unique visitors with activity including a first ever visit to the site during a particular period. I can look at return visitors, right? These are a number of unique visitors during a reporting period who also visited the site prior to that. This is very useful for determining site affinity and loyalty. So see, are we attracting new visitors because of a new marketing campaign? Do we have lots of return visitors that like our site and that actually are returning because they had a positive experience in the past? Here you can see that further being illustrated with a particular example. So you have A, B, C, D, all refer to visitors. I have two periods. That could be a month, that could be a day, that could be a week. And then I can look at the number of unique visitors for period 1. For the number of unique visitors is 3. This is A, B, and C. Repeat visitors, or the number of visitors during period 1 that actually have multiple site visits, right? So in this case, we have A and B. New visitors are visitors that we have never seen before. So this is B and C. And a return visitor is a visitor whom we have seen before. So this is A. All of that is typically done based upon cookies, and it will never be perfect. Why? Because if people erase their cookies or if they block their cookies, then the measurement will not be perfect. Also, all these measures are typically calculated during particular periods. So I have period 1 and period 2 here. So that could be month, day, or week, and we cannot just add them up. I cannot just add the number of unique visitors for period 1 and period 2 in order to find unique visitors for period 1 and period 2. You cannot add these numbers up, which is really very important. So that's already more useful information. We can also look at the visit characterization, more specifically at the visit length and depth. We want to see the number of page views per visit. The visitor browsed through 3 different pages, for example. We may also want to be interested in the time that a user spent on a particular page or the time on site, which is also called visit duration or length. Actually, a much more interesting question is how engaging is our content and what works and what does not work. And we have to be careful not to misapply this. In a support site, we want to solve the problem quickly and aim for short time on site. If you have a Dell support site, you don't want users to spend lots of time on your website, because if a user spends lots of time on your website, it means he or she is not able to solve their problem. So for the Dell support site, you typically want short times on site because you want to solve the problem as quickly as possible. Also for news sites, for example, if you go to sportsa.be or CNN, these are news sites. Many people are just going to go to that site, see whether there's some interesting news, and then leave the website. For content sites, you may want to get the customer engaged and aim for a longer time on site, because you want to make sure that the user has seen all the content that you're about to offer. For blogs, you will again see that you often have single page visits. People are just going to read the latest post and leave afterwards. Now, time on site cannot perfectly be measured. This is typically the case for many of these web metrics. We will never be able to unambiguously and perfectly measure all the measures, and this also relates to time on site. So here I have 3 pages, index.html, products.html, and reviews.html, which are being visited during a particular session. In the web log, it says that the first page was requested at 1 o'clock and the second page at 1:02. So then you know that the user spent 2 minutes on the first page. The third page was requested at 1:05, so you know that the user spent 3 minutes watching the second page, products.html. So at that moment, you know that the user spent already 5 minutes on the site, but you have no clue, you have no idea about how much time the user spent on the last page. So the time on site is always underestimated. We do not know how much time the user spent on the last page, which is commonly assumed to be 0. So the time on site is the timestamp of the last activity minus the timestamp of the first activity. When the user has only 1 page visited, then the metric becomes meaningless because you don't know when the user left, so you will have a time on site of 0. Now, a bounce rate is another very useful metric. This is the ratio of visits where a visitor left instantly. So imagine that you want to do a trip to Paris. So in Google you type in Paris. The first link you see, you click, and it turns out to be the website of Paris Hilton. This is not the page you're looking for, so you're going to quickly close the website and go to another search result. This is what we call a bounce. So you hit a web page, you're not finding what you're looking for, and you immediately leave afterwards. This is a bounce. So, and I can calculate a bounce rate of the site, which is the ratio of the single page view visits or bounces over the total number of visits. But I can also calculate the bounce rate for a page, which is the single page view visits of that page over the number of visits where that page was the entry page. Sometimes variations in the definition are being adopted. Like if sometimes we look at single page visits whereby a page refresh still counts as a bounce. So if you hit a website, you see a page and you refresh it just to see whether there's some new content on there, you refresh it, then this still could count as a bounce. Right? So refreshing the page could still count as a bounce. Sometimes people are also going to define bounce rates by looking at the time on site. If the time on site is shorter than 5 or 10 seconds, even despite the fact that the user visited multiple pages in that time span, so you can visit 2 or 3 pages in 5 or 10 seconds, then that may still count as a bounce, right? So it's a matter of defining it, and there exist multiple ways of doing that. A third measure, which is a bit related, is the page exit rate. And the page exit rate is going to look at the number of exits from a page divided by the total page views of that page. And here you can see all of those 3 measures being illustrated. So I have 8 visits. A, E, and B refer to web pages. The bounce rate of the site is 5 divided by 8 because I have 5 single page visits. Visit 2, visit 4, visit 5. So visit 2, visit 4, visit 5, visit 7, and visit 8. So I have 5 out of the 8 visits which only involve 1 page, giving me a bounce rate of the site of 5 divided by 8. I can also look at the bounce rate for a particular page, for page B. So now I'm going to look at the visits where page B was the first page. And this is visit 2, visit 3, visit 5, and visit 7. And how many times did the user leave immediately afterwards? So 3 times, 3 out of the 4 times. I can also look at the page exit rate for page B. So I'm now looking at all sessions that include page B. So that's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. So I get 6 visits which included page B. And out of 6 times, 5 times, the user left immediately after the visit, giving me a page exit rate for page B of 5 divided by 6. So you see, those are 3 metrics that tell you something about the attractiveness of your website and your web page. Also, very important information is referrer information. Referrer information, see the example we gave on Web Server Log, is going to tell you where your customers come from. Do they come from Google, do they come from Facebook, or do they come from any other website? So it's going to give me the referring website URI, and if the visitor comes in via a search engine, we're also going to find or see the search engine key phrases, the search terms. This is very useful for optimizing your acquisition strategies, for creating personalized experiences, for actually tailoring the website or web page to individual user needs, but also for A/B or multivariate testing, as we will see later on. The referrers are not always known because the website was bookmarked, so if you just ask for a website of your bookmarks of your favorites, there's basically no referrer. Sometimes the referrer is also not known because the URI was directly typed into the browser, because the traffic comes from an email marketing campaign, or because the visitor browser has hyper-secure security settings. What is very important to do once you have the referrers is to perform segmentation. You can segment based upon your referrers. You can look at your top 5 referrers. Let's say your top 5 referrers include Facebook, include Google, include some partnering websites, etc. And then you can look at the bounce rate for each of those top 5 referrers. And you can see what referrers give you high bounce rates. If you have a referrer that gives you high bounce rates, then it indicates that something may be wrong with the reference, right? So if you see that lots of Google traffic gives you bad or high bounce rates, it could be that Google has the wrong keywords connecting to your website. So segmentation becomes really very important. I can also report on my key phrases, the most popular search terms, etc. That will allow you to see what search terms typically connect to your website. Also very useful to look at are your top destinations or your exit links. Your top destinations or exit links are going to tell you where you're sending traffic to. For example, if the site www.abc.com has a link to xyz.com, then you want to, then information about the click is going to go to xyz.com. So if somebody clicks the link on abc.com, basically it will create an entry in the web server log of xyz.com, and the guys from abc.com cannot see that somebody is leaving their website for xyz.com. So ideally, the guys from ABC wants to see where they are sending their traffic or users to, because that gives you an idea about your top destinations or exit links. So how can I capture those? I can do it by means of a redirect, right? A redirect means that the link on abc.com first is going to quickly redirect to an internal page on abc.com, which is then going to move the user forward to xyz.com. So it's a redirect. First a link to abc.com, then to xyz.com. That way, an entry will be stored about the exit in the web server log of abc.com, and abc.com can see that it is sending traffic to xyz.com. There also exist JavaScript ways of doing exit tracking, right? So if somebody clicks on the link to xyz.com, we can actually generate a JavaScript event which will invoke a recording of the exit link stored on abc.com. So you can do it by means of an external redirect or by means of JavaScript-based exit tracking. Now, information about your top destinations or exit links is typically very useful, because if I have lots of traffic that I'm sending to some of my partnering websites, to some other websites, I can start talking to those other websites, and I can set up affiliate schemes. I can try to set up collaborations. I could say, hey, I'm sending you lots of traffic. Please also send me some traffic, or give me some money instead, right? I can also ask for reciprocal links. Means I'm having a link from abc.com to xyz.com, and I can ask the guys from xyz.com to also put a link to my website in order to have some traffic from them as well. I can also, again, analyze where different segments of visitors exit. I can do segmentation, right? I can look at visitors that come in through Google, through Facebook, and see how those are going to exit my website. That is really very useful information as well, because that allows me to see what my users are looking for. Another metric that is typically very useful is measuring outcomes using conversions. And a conversion means that the visitor is going to perform an action of interest to your particular site. That action could be anything. That could be a product or service purchase, that could be downloading a PDF, or that could be leaving behind user details. And I can look at micro conversions like clicking on an ad, starting a checkout process, or I can look at goal conversions whereby users successfully completed an action related to the objective of the site. The counting unit can then be the number of times the action occurred, the visits where the action occurred, or the unique visitors that basically performed the action at least once. If we look at those conversions, we also have to indicate the time frame of the count. The conversion rate is the percentage of visits or of unique visitors for which we observed the event. So you can again do it at the visit or visitor level. Also, it's typically reported, as I stated before, during a particular time period. So I can look at what percentage of visits includes an online purchase, which is an easy way to track the effectiveness of ad campaigns or test the effectiveness of alternative web page designs, right? I can look at my ad campaigns. Once I launched an ad campaign, I can see whether I have higher conversion rates, for example. I can also look at what percentage of unique visitors convert into online purchase in a given time period, which relies on, of course, unique visitor measurement. Again, segmentation is very important. I can again segment the way I want. And one popular way of segmenting is based upon referrer information. I can look at my top 5 referrers, Google, Facebook, other websites, and look at whether the conversion rates of those top 5 referrers are similar, whether I have referrers with high conversion rates, with low conversion rates, and then I can start thinking or analyzing the reasons behind this. I can also look at trends over time. I can look at whether my conversions are up or down. Conversions could be up because of a marketing campaign I launched. Conversions could be down because I have a new competitor entering business. Other metrics are average visits or days to purchase, which are pan-session metrics. With a pan-session metric, we mean that they span multiple sessions. So it's just not for one particular session, but measured across different sessions, right? So this is going to give us insight into how long it takes people to buy from our website or submit a lead. We can again apply segmentation. I can do the segmentation based upon a time period, whereby I can check for seasonality. I can do it based upon my top 5 referrers. I can do it based upon acquisition strategy, direct marketing, SEO, and so on. So again, an example of a metric that you can segment in various ways. Trends analysis is also very important because that will allow me to see, is there an upward or downward trend in certain metrics? Is there an upward or downward trend in bounce rates, in conversion rates, etc.? And once I see that trend, I can start wondering why. So I can compare this period's metrics against previous periods. That could be useful, but be careful because you can have seasonality effects there. I can have weekly patterns. So the solutions here are to make sure that you inspect a visual plot over a long enough period, and also make sure that you include observations from the same period last year, such that you have an objective benchmark to compare against. All of that can then be further optimized by estimating time series. Time series are statistical techniques that are going to give you projections in time. This can be monitored using dashboards. Dashboards we've seen in the chapter on business intelligence. Dashboards are going to give you a web-based format of representing KPIs, key performance indicators. They're typically concise, easy to understand. They will give you real-time or periodic snapshots. They will include all kinds of intuitive indicators such as gauges, stoplights, alerts. You can personalize them. which means that everybody that is having access to the dashboard can actually indicate the KPIs he or she is interested in. You can also provide links for further analyses. Those dashboards will typically also allow for OLAP, online analytical processing, to do further kinds of multidimensional analysis, etc. Here you can see an example of a dashboard implemented in SAS Web Analytics. You can see you have a set of KPIs like Google referred visits, MSN referred visits, 404, that means file was not found, 500, that means internal server error, and Yahoo referred visits. You can see the actual column, which specifies the value on the reporting date, the minimum during a particular reporting period, the maximum during a particular reporting period. You have a short-term and a long-term projection, which is being indicated by a traffic light here. There's also a forecast for each of those KPIs. You can forecast, you can also do a trend analysis, and you can compare the KPIs against a goal. So you see, all of that can be personalized. Every user can indicate the KPIs they're interested in, and they can perfectly personalize the dashboard. Segmentation is very important. I already said that. I can take any measure of interest, unique visitors, return visitors. I can look at conversion rates. I can look at time on site, time on page, and I can segment it. I can look at segments between different time periods. I can look at my top 5 refers. I can look at search traffic versus non-search traffic, and so on. So I could segment the number of visitors by bounds, no bounds, by traffic source, by acquisition strategy, by top 5 referring URIs. I can make combinations of those and so on. So that's what is so nice about web analytics. You can actually start to look for interesting patterns using segmentation. And this is fully automated using appropriate IT functionality, using the idea of dashboards, but also using the idea of OLAP, for example, online analytical processing. A little bit more sophisticated is navigation analysis. Navigation analysis is going to study how users navigate through your site. The first way is path analysis, and path analysis is going to see what pages are frequently visited together. What are common access paths through your website? So we're going to look at the analysis of frequent navigation patterns, and a path could be somebody accessing first page A, then page B, then page C. So here you want to see from a given page, for example, what other pages are a group of users typically going to visit. A funnel is going to look at a predetermined sequence. So it says I have a sequence A, B, C, that's a funnel. The sequence has been predefined. I want to see how users are going to enter that sequence, where do they come from, where do they leave to, how many are going to proceed from step 1 in the sequence to step 2, etc. A page overlay or a click density analysis is going to visualize where users are going to click on your web page. So it's going to say where users click, on what links they typically click. What are the most popular links? What are the least popular links? Which will then allow you to traverse through your website as groups of users typically navigated through it. The page overlay or click density analysis can then be also visualized as a heat map. A heat map is going to actually visit the whole web page in a color-based way, from red to yellow. Red meaning regions where lots of people click, and then yellow meaning regions where not a lot of people click. Again, we can apply segmentation, right? We can do path analysis, funnel analysis, page overlay analysis for different segments of users. Here you can see an example of a funnel in SAS Web Analytics, which is a popular type of software to do this. So you can see the pages. We have 2 pages there. You can see incoming traffic. You can see where the traffic comes from based upon the top 5 refers. You can see where traffic leaves after having seen the first page. You can see how many people move on to the second page. You can also see that we have new incoming traffic in the second page, how many people leave, where do they leave to, etc. So this is all very useful information to be analyzed to further understand how users are going to use your web page or how they're going to navigate through the funnel. Site overlay is then going to visualize where users click. So here you can see a web page, and you can see all the plus signs are connected to links. And if you just click the plus sign, you're going to see a small drop-down list with click counts, visitor counts, visit counts, unique visitor counts, all represented as percentages. This site overlay report can then be visualized as a heat map using colors indicating where users typically are going to click. As I already stated, using web analytics, you can also gauge the impact of your search engine marketing analytics campaigns. Remember, there are two popular ways of doing search engine marketing, being search engine optimization, SEO, which means that you want to improve your organic search results in Google or Yahoo. But you can also optimize for all major search engines. You have to make sure that you optimize for all major search engines such that a link to your website can be easily established. Pay-per-click was where you're gonna pay a search engine for including a link or ad to your website to appear in the search results. And remember, this works using an auctioning process, right? An example of pay-per-click was Google AdWords or Yahoo search engine marketing, and they will typically list your ad based upon the algorithm that they're implementing, the bid, and the bids made by the competition. So it's typically the result of an auctioning process. If you want to measure your SEO efforts, you can look at the inclusion ratio, which is the number of pages indexed, divided by the total number of pages on your website. Note, as we said earlier, that sometimes you do not want pages to be indexed, because the pages may contain very specific information, and if a user would see that information, he or she might get scared because it's too detailed, it's too specific. So using the robots.txt file we discussed earlier, you can prevent certain pages to be indexed or to be visited by search engines, by the search engine bots like the Google bots. In order to measure SEO efforts, I can ask for a robot or a crawl stats report, right, to see how frequently the website is being visited by search engine robots, how deep they get. This is typically based upon web server log analysis because robots are not going to execute JavaScript page tags. So you lose that when you do JavaScript page tagging. I can also track my inbound links. I can see what other sites are going to link to my site using the link command in Google. There also exist all kinds of specialized tools. One of them is Market Leap that will give you some search engine saturation reports showing the number of pages a given search engine has in its index for your site. Or you can also do all kinds of link popularity checks showing the total number of links that a search engine has found for your site. Google has also a series of tools called the Google Webmaster Tools, which are going to show the most popular keywords, the number of impressions or user queries for which your website appeared in the search results, etc. You can also try and track the ranking for your top keywords, key phrases. I can see what keywords link to our most important pages. I can consider the bounce rates thereof to see whether the keywords are appropriate, yes or no. If you have keywords with high bounce rates, it means that the keywords are clearly not important and relevant. I can split and compare organic referrals versus pay-per-click, so I can see what traffic comes in through search engine optimization, what traffic comes in through Google AdWords pay-per-click. I can compare the bounce rates for both to see whether they're similar. I can compare conversion rates for both. I can compare any kind of metric like time on site, visitor count for both, etc. In order to measure pay-per-click efforts, it is very important that we can first identify pay-per-click, because a user that comes in via Google can come in through search engine optimization by clicking on the organic search results, but he or she can also come in by clicking one of the links provided in the Google AdWords section. So you have to make sure that you can make a distinction between both. And in order to do that, we're going to make sure that we tag the URIs, the web addresses, the uniform resource indicators with additional parameters. So we're going to track www.google and then add the parameter like source is AdWords and campaign is campaign number 5. That will allow me to differentiate the incoming traffic from Google and see whether it comes in through search engine optimization in a spontaneous way or whether it comes in through a Google AdWords campaign. That's very important because if you have incoming traffic through a search engine optimization campaign, you also want to know the keywords there such that you know for what keywords we have good spontaneous organic search results. For those keywords you don't have to pay money because you already have that traffic. Also very important is that you want to differentiate bid terms versus search terms. What was the term or terms that you bid money for? That could be like laptop. And what is the search term that Google connected to it? That could be cheap laptops, right? That's very important. And that you can also get as you're measuring your pay-per-click efforts. You will also get all kinds of additional data like ad impressions, how many times the ad was seen, clicks, how many people clicked it, associated costs. AdWords is going to give you a keyword position report specifying the position your ad was in when it was clicked. It will also overlay unique visitors, conversion rates, bounce rates per position, etc. Finally, to conclude this section on web analytics, what is also very interesting is the idea of experimentation and testing, whereby you're going to set up an experiment presenting different pages, page elements, to different sets of visitors. That will then allow you to statistically compare a metric of interest, like the bounce rate or the conversion rate between those different pages. And there are different pages that I can consider to optimize. There could be the landing page, the most popular landing page. A landing page is the first page that the user sees when he or she visits your website. That could be the page that you land on after the user clicked on an ad. That could be the page in a checkout process. That could be the most popular pages. That could be even pages with high bounce rates, because obviously pages with high bounce rates are not that very popular. So you want to remedy this. One way of doing it is A/B testing. A/B testing means that you're going to test different versions of a web page. So if somebody clicks on a link to arrive at your page, I can split the traffic up into random samples, 3 random samples. The first random sample is 50% of the visitors. They see the original page. 25% of the visitors see version A, which is a version of the page with, a picture of Brad Pitt, for example, to make it more attractive. And then 25% is going to see version B, which is a picture of Angelina Jolie, right? So the web pages differ in their design, and then we can see whether the conversion or bounce rates are different amongst those 3 versions. And I can actually look at what web page gives me a high conversion rate or a high or low bounce rate, and I can statistically compare that using the appropriate statistics, right? That will then allow me to get insight into what page is most attractive. And then I can also link that to the user characteristics, and that way I really start tailoring or customizing my pages to individual users. If you want to do it more sophisticated, you can do multivariate testing, and you can test multiple things simultaneously on the web page. I can test different versions of the headline. I can make it cheap movies, interesting movies, or recent movies. These are different types of headlines. I can have different sales copies, right? I can put different movies there if I want. I can put different images, different hero shots. I can put different buttons. I can play with the button text. I can play with the button color. So these are different elements that I can play with in the design of my web page, which I can then subsequently offer to different groups of users, to different groups of visitors. And that way I can test out what version is most attractive to what group of visitors, what group of people, in terms of conversion rates, in terms of bounce rates. I can statistically compare all of that, and that gives me some very useful, some very actionable information in web analytics. This is something that is really very hot, very relevant these days. Okay. This basically concludes the section on web analytics and also basically the chapter on e-business.